Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our 5-minute Bible study. Today we are in Psalm 33, and you can download the PDF on our website at tobelikechrist.com. Psalm 33 is once again a psalm of David, a little bit shorter psalm, praising God for a couple things. We'll talk about that in our themes section. But first of all, the author we already mentioned is King David. There are no New Testament references to Psalm 33 that I'm aware of. Now let's talk about these themes. The first one is God should be worshipped for creating everything, for the beautiful stuff that he's created, the world, the universe. The second theme is that God should be respected as the King of Kings on earth over all of the nations. I do want to define again this idea of the fear of God. Now, we've done this in previous chapters, so I won't read this entire definition, but basically, when you think about the fear of God in the Bible, it means showing God the respect that is due to him as the creator of the world and as the King of Kings. Our chapter breaks down according to these two sections pretty evenly. So verses 1 through 9 of chapter 33 is our first section, and we're going to talk about worshiping God for creating the whole world. So worship the Lord who created everything. David begins the psalm encouraging his people to, quote, shout for joy in the Lord. He told the musicians to play on their instruments in thanksgiving to God. We know that there were some Levites who played instruments in the temple and perhaps other places in worship to God, and this was like their assigned role. God was worthy to be praised because the whole earth was spoken into existence by him. You can read about that way back in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. David writes in verses 8 and 9, "Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm." Now we can go to section number 2 and talk about our second theme. Verses 10 through 22, worship the Lord who rules over the nations. God created the world, and he is now the true King of Kings over the nation. So David, as someone who would become a king himself, contrasted the plans of human governments to God's plans. He says in verse 10 and 11, "The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the peoples. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations." So it says God's plans, they're established forever. Man's plans, not so much. Those can be changed. And if they get vetoed by God or God doesn't approve of them, then they're not going to happen. So in light of this truth, David blessed nations who chose to worship and respect the true God of heaven. And he felt blessed to lead Israel, which was God's special people who he had chosen to bless in a unique way. David described God as constantly looking down on the earth and observing the behaviors of men. Basically to say that he isn't a distant God, or it's not that he's uninterested in human affairs. And that kind of takes us down into our application section. I've actually got two applications, but they tie into each other. And I think especially with, I'm from the United States, there's elections coming up for the president. I know there's been a lot of political action around the world, a lot of things shaking up. So politics is on a lot of people's minds, and I think this chapter speaks beautifully to God's governance over all of that. So the first short application is God's not absent from government affairs. We shouldn't view politics in a deistic way. Deism is kind of the idea that God created the world and then he just kind of lets it go. He lets it run and he doesn't interfere. Right? We shouldn't view our politics in that way, as if they're just, God allowed these people to come to power and then he just lets them do whatever they want. The Bible definitely shows us that that's not the case in some of the ancient empires and even into the New Testament. So we shouldn't view politics in a deistic way, as if the direction of our nation is solely the outcome of human leaders and their choices. The second application, be careful before you embrace the trends that are promoted by your political leaders, even when your preferred candidate is the winner or is in office. Not everything that your favorite politician says should be endorsed or embraced as a way of life. Remember that only the counsel of the Lord stands forever, not the counsel of human beings. So every talking point of an earthly king, an earthly president, an earthly prime minister, whatever, must be scrutinized in light of the word of the King of Kings.